Listen to this.
This thing's dead as fried chicken on the Senate floor, and it's dead as fried chicken in the House. That's what this case is all about. This bill's all about, and I get it. You disagree with opinions of the United States Supreme Court.
Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono is on the committee that just advanced the bill. She joins us now live. Senator, we'll get your response to your colleague, Senator Kennedy, in a moment. But first, what specifically is in this bill that would reform the ethics guidelines of the Supreme Court?
First of all, let's understand that the United States Supreme Court does not have a code of ethics, the kind of code of ethics that applies to all other federal judges. So the highest court in the land should set a standard, should set the highest standard. They do not. And so this is a bill that would do that. And what will it do? It will establish a procedure for investigating ethical violations. It'll make much clearer recusal requirements. And the third is to give the court time to adopt a code of ethics, and if they do not, then one will be provided to them.
How exactly?
Does. I think. I'm sorry.
Senator, how exactly do you plan to then enforce those guidelines?
Some of the guidelines will be done through a commission that is established by the Judicial Conference. And so there are judicial conference procedures for investigating these kinds of things. And I don't think that we're putting together anything particularly new. The main thing to focus on is that the Supreme Court does not have a code of ethics. And so you have the circumstance of billionaires wining and dining our justices, and there is no disclosure as to any of this.
And Senator, you will need at least 9 Republicans for this bill to pass. Some of them are arguing, as Senator Kennedy did, that Democrats are only pursuing this because it's a conservative court and they're making decisions that you don't like. I'm wondering what you say in response and if you think this bill will ultimately pass.
The provisions of a code of ethics will apply to all justices, regardless of who nominated them, and note that they do bring up Sonia Sotomayor, and so yes, she would have to be bound too, as would all the other justices. And so this has nothing to do with the fact that we have disagreements on what this Supreme Court is doing, what I call an extremist Supreme Court. But setting that aside, I think the American people can understand that the Supreme Court should have a code of ethics. They should not be taking trips on airplanes and being wined and dined to the tune of, or on ships to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's absolutely no disclosure. And not to mention that shouldn't a justice recuse himself when his wife is involved in a case that comes before the Supreme Court?
Senator, there are questions about whether this kind of law would be constitutional. The Supreme Court is a separate branch of government, and if this passes, ultimately there might be a challenge. So wouldn't the justices wind up then deciding on the merits of a potential bill that might change their conduct?
We've already had a hearing with experts on determining whether or not Congress has the power to get this bill through the finish line, and we can, because the Congress establishes a number of other aspects of how the court operates. And this would not be anything different from what Congress can already do. So I would say that the legality of this kind of an approach is settled as far as I'm concerned. But the thing is that the Republicans say that there's nothing to see here, nothing to do. And so when we were dealing with this bill, they filed over 60 amendments. Most of the amendments had nothing to do with whether or not the court should have a code of ethics. And all these amendments were distractions, including, I know one that there was an amendment that would preclude gay shows in the Smithsonian or something like that. And so there were a number of those kinds of amendments to distract us from the fact that the Supreme Court does not have a code of ethics.
Senator, as we're discussing ethics, I'm wondering if you think members of Congress should be allowed to trade stocks. Often you're privy to information that the general public is not. So should members of Congress be held to a different standard?
No, they should not. In fact, there are some bills that relate to trading and information that's already illegal. but to make it even clearer to prevent trading in a certain kind of stock. So I've signed on to some of those kinds of measures. But the main thing is, we already have those kinds of provisions. We have, in fact, I held up the Senate ethics provisions. It is a book this thick. Whereas, what does the Supreme Court have? I think the Chief Justice sent us a 4-page memo that says we don't do this. I happen to disagree because, as I said, everyone should abide by a code of ethics. And did you know that there are private companies that require their employees, like Walmart and other companies that require conflict and a code of ethics of their employees?
Well, it is significant. Notably, that letter that he sent to your committee, all the other Supreme Court justices signed on in agreement, and he turned down an invitation to testify. What's your message to him and those Supreme Court justices that seem to agree with him?
He could, with the agreement of the other justices, but I am disappointed that they all are kind of, in my view, closing ranks. The fact of the matter is that the Supreme Court is not held in very high regard by the American public. I think there is a sense that this is not a Supreme Court that deals on a fair and objective way on the cases that comes before them, and therefore there should be disclosure of them being wined and dined, and I don't think it's asking too much that the Supreme Court have a code of ethics applied to them, not what the Chief Justice has said, oh, this is adequate for us. It is not.
Senator Mazie Hirono, we have to leave the conversation there. We appreciate you sharing your time and perspective with us.
Stay
Thanks.
tuned.
Thanks so much. We will, and we hope you'll come back.
Okay.
Brianna?